Hello friends, in this lecture we shall discuss priority sector lending targets. First of all, how priority sector originated. In the year 1972, it was first time that description of priority sector lending was formalized. Earlier, there was no such concept, but in the year 1972, this description was formalized. In 1974, the target were fixed for the first time at 33.3%, and these were to be achieved in a period of 5 years ending March 1979. In 1980, these targets were revised to 40%. So presently also these are 40%. In addition, the concept of weaker section was introduced. In the year 2007, the priority sector setup was reviewed by an in-house group of Reserve Bank of India headed by C.S. Murthy. Later on, in the year 2012, major changes took place as per recommendations of M.V. Nair Committee. And the latest major changes were introduced in the year 2015 on the basis of recommendations of in-house working group of Reserve Bank of India. So these recommendations were implemented from 23rd April 2015. And this in-house group was headed by Mrs. Lily Vadera. So this broadly is the origin and evolvement of priority sector concept. Now, what activities are covered in priority sector? So the activities have been expanded, and presently these include: number 1, agriculture; number 2, micro and small enterprises; number 3, export credit; number 4, education loans; number 5, housing loans; then social infrastructure, renewable energy, other priority sector loans, and certain investments which qualifies to be classified as priority sector. So you can note down all these. I'm sure friends you are preparing your classroom notes. You can stop the video anytime. You can rewind to watch it again. But you must prepare your classroom notes simultaneously. And your revision should be from your classroom notes and not from watching the video again. Now, linkage of priority sector targets. Priority sector targets are expressed as a percentage either of ANBC or CEOBE, whichever is higher out of these two, and the amount of these two is to be taken as on 31st March of previous year. So the targets are expressed as a percentage of ANBC or CEOB. Out of these two, whichever is higher, and amount is to be taken as on 31st March of previous year. ANBC stands for Adjusted Net Bank Credit, and these are primarily fund-based loans of the banks. CEOBE, it is credit equivalent of off-balance sheet exposure. and these are non-fund based exposures. So A and B C represents the fund-based exposures, CEOBE represents non-fund based exposures. So out of these two, whichever is higher, that will be taken for the purpose of fixing the target. As regards achievement of targets, the previous year data is not to be taken. Average of 4 quarters outstanding priority sector loans during the current year to be taken. Calculation of A and BC. Now how do we calculate A and BC? First we take bank credit in India, then bills rediscounted with RBI and other approved FIs are deducted out of this. So 1 minus 2, it gives us net bank credit. Now thereafter adjustment has to be made. So bonds, debentures in non-SLR category, in HTM category, plus other investments eligible to be treated as priority sector, plus deposits with RIDF, other funds with NABARD, NHB, SIDB. Eligible amount of exemptions on issue of long-term bonds for infrastructure and affordable housing. So then this is considered. Then eligible advances in India against incremental FCNR, NREFD, qualifying for exemption from CRR SLR. And finally, this is how A and BC will be calculated. So 3 plus 4 minus this 5 minus this 6, it will give us adjusted net bank credit. So to calculate A and BC, we have to consider these items, and finally this is how we reach A and BC. Now target for different types of banks. So first of all, the targets for domestic banks and also for foreign banks with 20 or more branches in India. So here these targets are common to these two category of banks. So priority sector loans should be minimum. Remember, this should be minimum of ANBC or CEOBE. For foreign banks, these banks, they were to achieve this 40% by 31st March 18, because previously this target used to be 32%. So in period of 5 years, they were to bring this to 40%. So foreign banks with 20 or more branches, they are to bring 40% by this date. Now, there are certain mandatory sub-targets within this 40% minimum. So these mandatory targets include, number 1, target for agriculture loans, then target for weaker section loans, then target for micro enterprise loans. So these are sub-targets as part of this 40%. Now we shall see the details of these sub-targets. Friends, I'm sure you are preparing your classroom notes simultaneously. So first sub-target is of agriculture loans. Agriculture loans should be minimum 18% of ANBC, minimum 18%. So here when we say ANBC, we assume that ANBC or CEOBE, whichever is higher as on 31st March of previous year. Now we can also say 45% of priority sector loans. So when we have to answer a question, how much of ANBC, then answer should be 18%. When we have to answer a question, how much of priority sector loans, then answer should be 45%. And this is applicable to foreign banks also. Out of this 18% of ANBC, at least 13.5% of ANBC should go to farmers or their self-help groups or their joint liability groups directly. In agriculture, we have two categories. One is corporate borrowers, other is non-corporate borrowers. So here, these are non-corporate borrowers. They must get minimum 13.5% of ANBC. Within this 18%, marginal and small farmers, they should get 8% of ANBC. And this 8% was to completed by banks in stages, that is 7% by 31st March 16 and 8% by 31st March 17. So while achieving this 18%, banks also have to make sure that out of this 18% of ANBC, 13.5 should be available to farmers or their self-help groups, and out of that 8% of ANBC should be made available to marginal and small farmers.